Alberto Núñez, a drug-free bodybuilder and coach at 3D Muscle Journey, and maybe even a former competitive powerlifter, you could say. A few years back, right?
Yes. Yeah, long time ago, different life.
So, Alberto, could you tell us a bit more about yourself and your experience in bodybuilding and powerlifting?
Yeah. So I started lifting in the 90s, technically. So 1999. I was 16 years old. I was I'm a bodybuilder now, so it's funny to say, but I was a great athlete. And because I was a great athlete, great athletes hate practice. They hate training. So the lifting part to me, I was always like, I don't want to do that. Like when it was time to lift, I'm escaping. So I stayed away from it for a long time, longer than I should have, like in hindsight, because as soon as I started lifting, I was like, whoa, this is like the perfect sport. Like, where have you been my whole life? So I started there, and then before I knew it, it's like, I don't even want to play these sports because it's going to cut into my like lifting. I like the lifting more, even though I wasn't necessarily as good at the lifting as the other things. It's just what got me going, and I would miss notes in class because all I could think about was like the training session later that day. I think especially a lot of people like lift because they want to look better, look different, maybe appeal to to other folks. And for me, it was crazy. I started lifting. I was like, I don't even want to hang out with none of you guys. Like, I'm good. I just want to go lift weights. So yeah, it was like my first love for sure. And things kind of like took off from there. Although when I started, like the landscape was very different. Like if you wanted to bodybuild, like it was almost prostitution. Like all the top like bodybuilders at the time, like they had these little side gigs, right? Like this was before OnlyFans and stuff like that. So like, tell my friends, I want to do something with bodybuilding. They're like, well, that's what you can do. And then powerlifting was even worse. Powerlifting was not worse in that way, but worse in that like it was only like equip powerlifting. So if you didn't want to speak that language, like it was crazy. All my friends would start a power, and their goal was just to like be obese, grow a beard, and like look like they could. Like that was part of the look. Like you were part of the cosplay, right? Like you wanted to be a super heavyweight, big, look like you're gonna explode under squat, super wide squat. It was just a different world. So on the warm ups, wasn't very appealing. So I selected natural bodybuilding, I think, and I didn't know where it was going to go. I knew it was a big life's risk, but it kind of worked out at the end. It was a risky time to chase my passion because the internet isn't what the internet is today, So, and it was weird to do this. It was not cool. But now it's cool. Now we're here, and I can talk openly about what I do for a living, and it's pretty cool.
About loving bodybuilding,
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, I started training about 12 to 13 years ago. So,
whoa.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a minute. So, one of the first, you could say, interactions I had with bodybuilders was on the forums of bodybuilding.com. And that's how I got to, that's way back.
I was there. My screen name was Father Flex.
I remember Lane Norton being there.
Yeah.
And, I think I got to know you maybe through Christian Guzman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, it's been a long time. And as you say, bodybuilding and powerlifting has changed a lot in the past, probably 5 years, you could say. And I imagine that since you've been lifting since the 90s, it's been a wild ride.
Yes, absolutely. But it's heading in the right general direction, I think.
I think so, yeah. When did you start coaching bodybuilders, powerlifters, people in general?
So I think I did a lot of like unpaid apprenticeship without knowing. Right. So for example, I coached a little track back in the day, and like that taught me to work with people, right? When you are the person that kind of knows the most, like you geek out on this stuff in the gym, it's natural for people to come and ask you for questions, and then before you know it, you're doing free work, and it sucks because half the time they don't complete it because they didn't pay for it, right? But
Yeah.
I got a lot of practice that way, and then I don't think I started getting paid until 2007. 2007 was my first paid athlete, and I did a terrible job in hindsight, but that's how it goes, like
That's
you
how you
learn, like
learn. Yeah.
yeah. So, I can go back. It's like I was okay given the time. I wasn't dangerous, but you always want to take your first pupils and be like, thank you, like for sitting in on this class,
Yeah.
right?
Thank
Yeah,
you for being my guinea pig, right?
basically.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we've been a part of this for a long time. I saw the boom of if it fits your macros on bodybuilding, and then
Mm,
just how it moved from being eat whatever you want and then just going back to old school. And I think now people are enjoying more of an animal-based diet, and it gets kind of messy, but we always go back to the same things, right? So
yeah.
what are the biggest changes in nutrition you've noticed in powerlifting in the past 5 to 10 years?
Mm. I think, when it comes to the nerdy side of things, it's always the middle of the bell curve you want to impact the most, right? Like that's who sees the most benefit from finding more efficient ways of doing things. Like, like in bodybuilding, like the freaks have always been the freaks. They don't listen to anyone because everything they do
Yeah,
works, right? They don't care. Um,
they'll be freaks
so
regardless of what they eat, of how they train. If they're meant to be freaks genetically, they'll do it.
and that's the thing. People don't get this. Like even in the real big sports, it's the exact same way. Like you manage
Yeah,
talent, you don't make talent.
exactly.
Um, and I do feel that the average um, literacy, nutritional literacy in powerlifting has improved tremendously over the last 10 years. Yeah, it used to be, I start a lot like my generation, a lot of people would quit bodybuilding. They're like, because I'm just gonna do body powerlifting because I don't want to watch my diet anymore, you know?
Yeah,
And like that's where they were basically. And it was a big step if you just weren't a super heavyweight, right? And now it's come to the point where I think in order to get the most out of your training, it doesn't play as big of a role as I can potentially, well, maybe it can in some people, as it does in bodybuilding. But like a lot of people it could be a big fraction like on your total, I think. So
yeah.
the literacy is there. The average like macro, like if I were to tell a power lifter about a macro, like just 5 years ago, like I think half of them would be like, "What is that? Is this like an economics class?" So it's improved.
Yeah, it's getting better, and I think that now the top powerlifters are going down weight classes because
Mm.
it fits
Oh
them,
yeah.
it's better for them.
Hmm.
I think nutrition and just being more aware of nutrition year round has great value in powerlifting, because also I think that 2 years ago you could see powerlifters be in their off season and just
Yeah.
be really above their weight class and then just lock in 6 weeks before their competition and just absolutely die the week of the competition trying to make weight, right? So that's
Yeah,
one
and it's
thing.
just a different body. It's a different body to play in, right? Like if you are,
Yeah,
doing a lot of your best lifting and 7 to 8% above your platform
your
weight.
weight class.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of people are getting smart with that, and it's funny though. I do think like if you are playing for something in powerlifting, yeah, that's going to change things. The fact that a lot of people, big names, are kind of moving down a class. But I think also it can be a distraction for someone who's just like getting started.
Yeah.
One of my um, one of my good friends and really smart man, like Dr. Mike Zerdos. He kind of he got the
Mm-hmm.
DUP going, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like people, I remember this was like in a private forum somewhere, but someone had asked him about like making weight, and then like this is just how Mike is though. He's a straight shooter. He's very like quickest way to the solution. That's what we're going to do. He's like, what? does your body weight have to do with the powerlifting meet? That's it. Yeah, it makes you think. You're like, oh yeah, well, not really, nothing, right? It's like it can potentially impact me from having my best day and me being the strongest I can be. Like the weight class is kind of irrelevant, for a
Yeah.
newer person, especially, right?
Yeah, and as I can speak from experience because I'm not really fit to be in the 52 weight class, under 52 weight class, but that's the weight class I chose because it's the one I was the most competitive in. But every weight cut I did has been an absolute mess. And I know I perform better sitting at like 58 kilos, but trying to get to the 52 weight class just because I knew I had a chance to do something interesting in the world
Yes.
has been really tempting and was really tempting. But in looking back, I think that I spent the last year just not fulfilling my potential. I was just really messed up my progress when I could have just focused on being stronger, growing into the 57s. I think I might even get to the 63s. And one thing that sometimes just stops us from doing that is the formulas that sometimes reward the lighter weight class.
Yeah.
So you think, oh, I'm not going to be the strongest lifter or the best lifter overall, but you're going to be stronger. And you're going to enjoy probably powerlifting a lot more since you're not spending all your time cutting and trying to make weight.
Yeah, but yours is kind of a privilege in a way. Like yours is a little bit different, but like if you're trying to, I don't know, speak to a guy that like, it's like, does it really matter like where you get like your 575 total? Like this is your first or second meet. Like just do the meet wherever you feel the strongest, and then like later on we can find a home. But yeah. So that can be the distraction.
You also see some, really skinny dudes. I've seen it with guys mostly. Staying at the 66 weight class, the 59s, the 74s, and I'm like, bro, you could be so much stronger just gaining weight, building muscle. And your technique is only gonna get as good as
it can,
as it can, and building muscle will help you improve some of your lifting. What are some hacks you think powerlifters could learn from competitive bodybuilders?
By the way, I'm glad that you're moving up, just trying to explore, and like seeing what happens. It's like I got my taste, got that little, chance at Worlds, and that's a privilege in itself, right?
And it's tempting. I mean, it always the voice in the back of my head is like, you have another year as a 52, and then I'm like, no, I'd probably die. And I'm gonna get back to this when we talk about fat loss trauma. That's one concept I really want to talk with you. So yeah, we're gonna get back to this. So
yeah. That's why I tell Delaney too. Like Delaney, I'm always like, bro, like if you would you would be like, I don't know, maybe top 15 or something if we went up a weight class, if we're lucky, realistically. Like so you'd kind of have to be okay with that for a while. But I think it would add to your career because durability is a real thing in powerlifting. Yeah, for sure. Just more padding, right? But it's a hard investment to sell when you could just be really good per the sport right now. Yeah. So, but yeah, like things that I think it goes both ways. Like I'm a fan of both sports. Obviously, like there's one that I excel at much more. But nevertheless, like I can't help, it's almost like I feel like it's very similar to like here in the United States, like there is always been this relationship with rap artists and like NBA players. Like they both kind of want to be each other. And I think like with bodybuilders and powerlifters, they kind of want to be each other. But the bodybuilders especially don't want to say that, oh, man, I guess it feels cool to be strong. PRs feel pretty awesome, right? But so I see the blind spots.
Yeah, you see bodybuilders going ham with their with their exercises, RP 9, 10. They want to feel strong, but they don't like or aren't as good at the main lifts. So they enjoy it. Yeah.
And there's a lot of misconceptions like with both parties in regards to how they train. Like most bodybuilders to think that, oh, powerlifters just go in there like one set every 15 minutes and they're maxing out every day. I'm like, not even close. Not even close. They stay further away from failure than you do on average if you're doing your job as a bodybuilder. But yeah, so I see the blind spots and a lot of the things that each side can learn from each other, but they just don't communicate. And that is, like one thing I'm very proud of is the fact that my upbringing, my education before I got really zeroed into bodybuilding, like I read like Mel Siff's like Super Training, like when I didn't really need to. I just to me, it's just I'm just curious about this whole like section, and then at a certain point I specialize, kind of like you recommend with kids. It's like, hey, play all the sports, and then eventually, you're 16, 17, pick your sport. But it's good to be well-rounded. And I borrow from everything, from every world. Like every world I look at now, it's like I always look at it from a bodybuilding perspective. And like, how can I extract that? Like, how are we having the same issues here? But back to your question, I think the biggest thing I feel is just it probably falls under the umbrella of like lifestyle outside the gym. Right? Like I think sometimes powerlifters tend to behave too much like athletes, like because like they are, right? So like, it's like going to sleep late, 3 in the mornings and 11 sometimes. It's just all over the place, right? And the meals are kind of chaotic, same thing. Whereas like bodybuilders, like I almost outside of the drugs, like if my child was like, hey, I'm going to bodybuild. As a parent, I'm like, okay, well, let me see, you're gonna be cooking your meals, like let's say they're off in college, right? You're going to be cooking your meals, going to sleep on time, leaving parties early. So probably everything under that umbrella, I think it plays such a big role in bodybuilding because the name of bodybuilding is like the game is easily explained as my buddy Kaz said this, the sport of over recovery. So it's like you stimulate and then you over adapt, stimulate, over adapt. That's just what it is. So is powerlifting to a large extent, but there's this big technical component to it. But you still need the adaptation to take place. So I think everything under that umbrella, nutrition, training, stress management, all these things, like living more like monks is what I would like to see from powerlifters.
Yeah. And I also think that it's also like a cultural thing. They're in the phase where pre-workout is everything. They love caffeine and they think caffeine is gonna solve all their problems, all their habits that are not set in place is gonna be fixed by supplements and caffeine and everything else, instead of just focusing on having better habits around your training and during the week. Would you say that sorry.
No, I was going to say you guys are a much funner crowd for sure. Like I remember I used to go to USAPL Nationals like all the time. Like honestly, it was I had a few athletes, but also because you guys partied hard, and I knew that it was like 4 or 5 days of party. So, yeah.
So I know that you've done prepositioning diets for your athletes, right? Mm-hmm. So it's could you explain it a bit more so I don't butcher the explanation?
Yeah. But I'm so impressed by how much you know, by the way, because like it's just not even. It's like I said, you like to learn. You want to be well-rounded so that you can extract and bring to your world. Like right, we read a fucking poem about hummingbirds. There's something there for you powerlifting, for me bodybuilding, right? So prepositioning basically is there is kind of like your fighting weight, where you make the best progress, where life has less constraints, and we kind of just stay around there most of the time. It might not always be the physique you like the most, but who cares? We're getting better. It's investment time, right? You're not seeing the money now, but eventually you will. And then what takes place is these 2 points, like what is peak bodybuilding, what is contest shape, and like your fighting weight, they can be so different that what we like to do is at a certain point have this fat loss phase where we prepare for the actual prep by just getting rid of the excess body fat, the one that's easy to remove. You don't really feel it. You can go through it at a pretty accelerated rate. I'm actually officially on that right now. As of yesterday, I think. I just decided, I'm like, oh, I should probably start that.
I saw you eating veggies. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I said I'm not dieting, but then later that day, I'm like, you know what? I looked at the calendar, and I'm like, I should probably start setting myself up for success. So yeah, you get all the easy stuff off, and then you get to the lower end of your intervention point. Ideally, this would be somewhere between 8 to 12% above your stage weight. And then you kind of hold / lean gain for about 4 or 5 months, enough to run, some, when I say mesocycle, a lot of people think of mesocycles and they take it literally like a month.
Yeah.
I hate that. Like, I think mesocycle, to me, just what it means is like, how long does it take for me to get this point across? Right? Like
Okay.
to do this thing we want to do, this adaptation. So let's just say after this accelerated diet, I'm like, oh shoot, my calves suck. They always will, but my calves suck. I'm gonna run some specialized stuff from here until the prep when it starts, because obviously it won't be as robust as a surplus. Let's do that, and then prep, and then guess what? I start from a really good place. So it's like just the big thing here, I think, in my very convoluted explanation of it, is that it's setting you up for peaking for bodybuilding, and you just want to be at a place where it's like kind of relevant, and you're taking into consideration the specificity of the sport, right? So
right.
That's my best explanation.
Yeah, and when I saw, I think it was first on a podcast on your YouTube channel, I think that it clicked for powerlifting in the way that, as I said, most of the time powerlifters during their off season, they just eat whatever they see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And enjoy the off season, and then maybe 12 weeks out, if they are really on point, they go from eating whatever they want to just a fat loss phase, and then trying to make weight. And it makes for a very, very difficult process for them mentally, and then building the habits they need to improve. And then after the competition, they're like, okay, so now my off season starts again, and they just bounce back, right? So I think that having something like a prepositioning diet, going from your off season to just maybe a bit of a fat loss phase, and then maintaining a bit, and then just another fat loss phase, and then maintaining, going into your meet could be a better option than just cutting for 12 weeks before your competition, right? So that's one of the ideas I got from that podcast.
Yeah. It's a very similar concept, right? Like I remember first time I got lean, because contest lean is contest lean. Like I forgot who it was. I think it might have been Ashton. Like he asked me what his body fat percentage was, and I told him we'll keep that between us, and like what the weight potentially would be, right? And like so it's just different. And one of the beautiful things about muscle, right, and it's one of the reasons that we tell people that you should lift weights before you try to lose fat, like, if you're just starting, is that it contours body fat, right? So I was like 200 during my first prep. I was like, oh yeah, because I got to be 200 if I lift weights. Otherwise it's like I don't lift weights. And I lost 40 pounds to get on stage. Like I found out that like emaciation, right? So these 2 points were so far away, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be a happy medium, right? It's like, okay, I don't got to be 200 pounds because I'm just going to be 160 at the end. So, okay, like let's try to live a lifestyle like it's somewhere in between, right? Where you can be like, I guess, sports specific all year round, like, right?
Yeah.
Weight class or 5% body fat, but you got to put yourself in a place where right? It's kind of like if one of your powerlifters is like, hey, like all my 20 RMs on the big lifts went up, and you'd be like, well, that's cool, but like that's not
That's
powerlifting,
not the
right?
point.
Like
Yeah.
that's not the point. We're so far off from the specificity of our sport, right? We might even suck at it more now, right? So
Yeah.
so yeah, like you always want to be in striking distance of what it is that you want to do. You have to decondition and back off. That's something all sports kind of know. Um, but you got to set yourself up so that it's not basically, as you just described, just it's procrastination. It's like, oh, the better version of myself will wake up tomorrow and then deal with all this. Like that's what we're trying to avoid. You
Yeah,
want the
problem for
average
us,
version
the
of you
future
to,
you.
yeah, you want the average version of yourself to be elevated slightly so that, hey, like this predictable outcomes. That's all we really want here, right? Like at the end, that's all we're after. And it's very unpredictable when you have this 12-week diet, a very different body from like what it was at its peak body weight. You're making a lot of extra work for yourself, even though you think you're actually kind of, I guess, hacking and saving like, some of your focus for later. Nah, it's just better to do some every day.
Yeah, it never works because when you, for example, when you go on holiday and you eat whatever you want, you have a great time. Just getting back to your daily habits, it's so hard, right?
It is.
And
Yeah.
if you spend most of the year having the best life and eating whatever you want and not really focusing on the basic stuff, when you try to adhere to a diet for 12 weeks, it's even tiring on the brain, really fatiguing sometimes. Yeah. So.
And here's the thing about the good habits. Like I'm Monica, I'm fucking eating a V8 like because I want to. Like like
All the
eventually
micros,
uh
yeah.
it's not even like there is no effort. It's like going to the gym. It's like what people don't get, like a lot of your friends look at your lifestyle and they're like, oh, training that much, like must suck, right? Wouldn't you rather? And it's like, nah, like you have no
I love
idea. I
this,
don't
yeah.
remember my own life and I don't want to be involved in that. Like this is and the same thing with these other things. These are other little discoveries that eventually what they really are at the end is, and this is kind of getting away from sports, but I think this is a little great lesson in sports. It's a way of it's like self-nurture. It's like self-care is what it is, right? Like you're lifting to you. It's like I go and I take care of myself. Like this is my adult recess, but there's a built-in game in here. Then through this, I learned many life lessons, and it just makes me overall a better person. And there's a lot of that too, like outside the gym. But people just have a hard time listening to the whispers of life, right?
Yeah, it's really hard if you've spent most of your life just enjoying and getting quick gratification. I think it's called.
Yeah, the instant gratification. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, instant gratification. And if you have spent most of your life living that way, just making the switch to delayed gratification, it's kind of hard, right?
Yep.
But
eventually it's like you do weird shit
nature.
every day, right? Like you do stuff that like 7 years ago you had been like, you're fucking crazy, lady. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is how you live?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how I live.
Yeah.
Right? So you just have to, and here's the key to like kind of like renovating your life from this perspective is like just people take on too much. Like too much, and this is going to be relevant to the topic of the fat loss trauma. Like you take on too much, it burns you, and that's really fucking exhausting. Instead of, I don't know, treat yourself like you would treat a kid, right? It's like you wouldn't have a smart kindergartner. It's like you can do fucking 5th grade because you're smart. It's like you're fucking setting him up for failure. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So same thing. People just go too many steps ahead. Like we see this. It's very obvious with like people in January. When they sign up for gyms and all of a sudden our friends that don't train are going to the gym more times a week than us. Their fridge looks better than our fridges, and you're like, that shit ain't gonna last. Like 6 weeks later they're done. Yeah, right? People in our field like do that to themselves too, though.
Yeah, and I mean we make fun of the people in January, but when you're just doing everything for 6 weeks, you're being a resolutionist, you could say, right? So it's not much different, just on a different level. And I think that sometimes we just want to make food or your habits be a lot more flashy. Like you want to eat the lowest calorie food, but that tastes awesome, right? And you do all these macro gymnastics to fit in your diet, and it's such a mental fatigue that sometimes people don't realize, right? And then it also is something that makes your diet harder. So if you're always eating delicious food and you're always enjoying your meal, you're always want to be eating. So it makes everything harder, right?
Yeah, I think I said this on the podcast with Sean, like when it came to like your baseline foods, it's like you always want to control, and I think this is just in life. Like I am probably at this point, if you haven't guessed it, if you're like listening to this podcast, I'm probably like undiagnosed ADHD, like 100%. You know, which I think it's a superpower if you know what to do with it, right? But like, so one thing I think everyone can kind of learn to like is just making your world smaller, like making your what it requires to get arousal from you just like a lot like lower, right? So and I compare this to, I don't know, like when you fucking see cartoons, right? It's like I'm the bad guy and I'm the good guy. It's like so obvious because children need that shit, right? It needs to be in your face here right now. Whereas like as adults, like like I like me complex fucking shows. Like for example, I guess Sopranos is kind of bordering on it, but like I like how Tony, like sometimes you hate his ass, sometimes you don't. Same thing with Breaking Bad, his wife, like sometimes you hate her, sometimes you're like, oh, she's got a point. I don't know. Like it's complex, right? And the same thing with our foods. Like if we always want these like zings, like it needs to be like that stimulating, like 10 scale all the time. Well, that just becomes your threshold, right? But if you're kind of just fucking drinking water without flavor, and you can appreciate that, if you can appreciate the strawberries in your bowl of strawberries, like this one's an 8, this one's a 4, but you know what? Like it's all part of the experience. Guess what? That's just fucking life, right? There's parallels in everything. I think that is a key component. It's just like making your nutritional life like simple, making it less about like the zing you get right now. And like you said, it's like be forward thinking about what it is that you're doing. Eventually this takes shape when it comes to everything else in life.
Yeah, eventually you're just gonna enjoy eating chicken. And if you cook it properly, right? It's one of the basis of nutrition, just getting to know how to cook things so it doesn't suck as much. But it's most of the time you're gonna be eating something boring that isn't a pain in the ass to eat, that you enjoy, but isn't the most delicious thing, right? So I see it all the time on TikTok and on Instagram, these crazy recipes, right? With all the flavors of whey protein, and then the I think it's the cheesecake pudding they put on yogurt, and they make these huge bowls of like 100 calories, and then you're just eating to eat, right? And then you're never gonna stop eating. And if you're eating something like a plain old chicken with rice and veggies, you're gonna get tired and bored of eating it. So it's gonna help you on your fat loss diet instead of craving that awesome weird concoction you did with your Greek yogurt, right?
Yeah, you just, man, it's there's just it's best way to explain it, I think is like I was trying to look for the word that's like the opposite of hedonic, right? Like there's a time and a place for that, absolutely. But I think it's always better to like this is another thing I said in Sean's podcast. 2 events like with me in my childhood. I remember we only got 30 minutes of TV growing up, and because we only got 30 minutes of TV, like compared to my friends, like I'd be at my friend's house, they're fucking jumping on couches, the TV is on. I'm like, do you guys not see this glorious TV is on? Like, what are we doing? Like it's either this or that, right? So my 30 minutes were so like enjoyed, and like in hindsight, like I hated that rule as a kid, but I'm like, man, that did me a lot of good. So like I appreciated every minute of that experience. And I think that's how it should be with like these, like stop having a fucking fake cheesecake. Just have a real cheesecake. And when you do have it,
Once in
like,
a while. Yeah.
because your threshold for like yummy is like so much slower now. Like this is like, it's weird. This is how I am with food. It's like literally like if Snoop Dogg, I don't smoke weed no more, but like if Snoop Dogg passed me one of his blunts, I'd be like, oh, that's it, that's it. I mean, he's like, have more. I'm like, no, I can't. That's literally what a fucking cheesecake tastes to me now, because like my baseline palate, like I don't have to fucking eat cartoons like other people. You know, it's like I have my cheesecake and I'm like, very quickly my brain understands it's like, oh, it's diminishing returns. It's diminishing returns. And like the first bite's the best bite. To guess what? The second bite's not nearly as good. And that pattern just fucking continues. And before you know it, you're just fucking eating cold French fries for no reason. You know?
Yeah.
Right? So that's literally what we have to train out of ourselves, but it's so unnatural to. But I mean, fuck, when you think about like powerlifters, like you guys do some pretty fucking gnarly things. Like every cell in your body, like on certain lifts, is telling you like, fuck this shit. Get out
I
of
don't
here.
want to be
Like,
here anymore.
stop.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, we're going in, right? Right into
Yeah.
the fire. Fuck it. Yeah, like so it's in there. It's in there to like go against like what your body is designed to avoid, right? And there's great lessons in that, right? Like I'm sure you have grinds and lifts. It's like, man, you go back and you look at those and you're like, fuck that. That's how strong I fucking am, you know? And the same thing with like nutrition. Is this a nutrition? Again, it can be kind of all encompassing, but there is a sweet balance where, like, if anything, you know, I think um yeah, there's more pleasure in like a certain level of abstaining, right?
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, and it takes your brain off just thinking about food all the time. That is one of the things that usually happens when you're on a fat loss diet and you're constantly eating delicious food and all these macro creations. You're always looking forward to your next meal, right? So your brain is always like, I can't wait to my 9 p.m. protein oats with a lot of whatever, right? So yeah,
And I love it because like in your story, you're always talking about like monkey this, monkey that, right? And I'm like,
yeah.
it's like literally we have our fucking monkey brain that literally is it's like this fucking thing you borrowed, you're renting, and then you have the conscious versions. Like this is like I guess the other you, like the true you, almost you could say, but not necessarily because there's still a fucking monkey at the end. But the fucking monkey,
Yeah.
the ape, wants to take control half the fucking time. You know, like today I'm looking at my office and I'm like, fuck, it's like a fucking ape lived here for a day. Right. So, but yeah, like you need to learn to control that fucking animal, and the more you do, the better off we are, like collectively.
And the easier it gets eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
First you have to do
got
it
a nice
consciously,
domesticated
and then it's
monkey.
gonna be, yeah. That's what we are in everything, right? In everything in life.
Yep.
We can't act on our first instincts every time, right? So it's just
no.
doing the same with nutrition, just getting to that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just got to train that out of you, and it's hard, but it's worth it. And yeah, but that's what we are, right? It's like whenever there's pandemonium and then like there's humans, like I don't know if you've ever noticed, but we sound like chimpanzees, like 100%. All right, like that's literally what it sounds like, right? So
yeah,
that's us at our core.
So just to
okay,
wrap
keep
it
going
up,
before I take us down like other adventures.
No, I don't have ADHD, but I don't know. My brain sometimes just leaves and goes to different places. So it's also difficult to just stay in track. Let's just wrap it up with the fat loss trauma. I know you've talked about it in one of your podcasts in bodybuilding, and I've experienced it with powerlifting to make weight. So do you think there's anything that can be done to avoid it? Like, for example, let's say I want to compete again in the 52 weight class, right? Crazy decision after the past 2 years of almost dying to make weight. Would you think there'd be a way for me to avoid having just these awful experiences, or is it something you're gonna experience anyway?
it's the long scenic route, right? But it's very hard to convince people of that. Yeah, it's there's a long way. That's usually the right way. Um, right? It's very hard to convince anyone who's very excited about powerlifting that, like, okay, this is what you want to dedicate some of your time here on Earth to. It's going to be about 10 years though before like you're worth a shit. Are you okay with it?
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, nah, nah, it can't be. I'm gonna go with someone who tells me it's 5, 3, 2, right? And it's like, no, it just say it's 10. But here's the thing, it's like if you like surrender to that idea, you're more likely to get there sooner. But the people who want to like take the 3, 5 year plans, they're the ones that it ends up turning 15, 20, or it never happens. Um, so is there a way? Yeah. But all these things that we mentioned, you would have to just go step by step, step by step. You know, it's like a fucking Karate Kid. Like, you know, he's fucking whack. He's
Wax
like,
on,
when do I
wax off.
fucking learn
Yeah.
to fight? It's like, no, bro, like not yet. You stop asking, right?
Not yet.
So
Year by year,
that's what it
right?
feels like. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
So it's with nutrition. I think it's tricky because um, I think humans at their core all have this thing that like if you fucking play with like starvation, like if it's a real thing, it just sets off some things that are just like dormant in you. We wouldn't be here as a species if it wasn't for that. We're the only primate, right, that can store as much body fat as like we can for a fucking reason. Because, you know, yeah. So there's these built-in things that you experience it, you get fucking weird. I've been there. And like in hindsight, it was very valuable, but it could also have gone terribly wrong as well. If you want to learn more about this, not you, but like people listening, because I'm knowing you, you probably know this already, but the Minnesota starvation experiment, like how frantic was that? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, so this was back before ethic boards were a thing, right? I think it was they took a group of soldiers that weren't necessarily okay with participating when it came to the war that was going on. Um, so they're like, all right, well, y'all can do this, sign up for this experiment. It helps us because I guess their main interest was how do we refeed people like who are in war-torn areas?
Okay.
So they starved these men. Like it was, in the symptoms that came out, just to give you an idea. Oh, like for sure, like the libido, you know, like I remember for me, it happened my first time, and it was just so weird. I'm like, what? Like, I'm 23. I should know. Remember, there was this rap song that came on that had some very explicit lyrics, and then I remember just like turning it off. I'm like, fuck this bullshit. Like, what? Like, just boomer in my head,
What
right?
are you
Just,
thinking?
what are you doing? What are these kids talking about, right? But like, it neuters you. So there's that. There was the guys would get crazy with the bubble gum, like insane with the bubble gum. Like they couldn't stop chewing the bubble gum. They would
I got to that
play with their
point
food.
this past prep. I
And
I
here's a
I
part
needed
that's weird.
I needed the bubble gum to survive, to avoid eating everything on my side.
Oh, okay. We'll get back to that. Let me break that down for you. But like, they were doing food porn before food porn was a thing. Like before they would eat,
Oh,
they
really?
would like put their stuff up in like these like intricate designs, like make art out of it. It'd be a process, you know. At the end, like I think 2 of the men in the experiment ended up switching their career paths. They just wanted to do something in the culinary world. They had no interest in that
Oh.
before. Weird one was that they become very preoccupied with their appearance. Crazy. Where does that come from? Right? I think it's a mixed signaling there because, yeah, you're preoccupied. I think like if you were a caveman 40,000 years ago, and it's like, fuck, I'm dying. Obviously, I'm preoccupied. But I think with the mixed cultural signals of like, you know, fat, skinny, fit, not like, I think it gets convoluted and turns into something weird. But they were, I guess, concerned with not being lean enough in some cases. Anyhow, they were very preoccupied with their bodily appearance when that was never a thing. So starvation, all sorts of weird things, for sure. Okay. Like it's in there. Like, don't fuck with us. When you do that, like your ape will go fucking wild, like just throwing dookie all over the room. Right. So, but we can tame it, but it's kind of like taming a dog, right? It's like you don't go to the most advanced trick on day one. Like I think personally, most people would be better off when they start lifting, for example, if what they wanted to do is like change their body comp, which a lot more people have that goal, but very few people want to admit it. It'd be like, hey, just eat protein 3 times a day. This is your fruit and vegetable allotment. Just do that. More inclusive other than restrictive. And I guarantee you, like most people would have a better time with that. That's like the most amazing step. The first thing I wish people would do. But of course, people don't start there. So that's the issue, is that people skip steps.
Instead of kindergarten. Yeah.
Yeah, they go do the fucking, I don't know, carnivore diet, right? Something like that, right? So, and then of course, very few people survive. So, you know, that we have, what's it called? Survival bias, right? Like the one guy that makes it, he's like, this is fucking great. You know, cured me of all these things, and they're speaking the loudest. And it's like, anyhow, yes. So I think the biggest thing people do wrong with fat loss is the interventions are too aggressive, too early. You want to leave with some RPE in your tank. So like today I had a call with a man who, he was like, whoa, this felt great because we got to a certain body weight and he's got more in there. And of course, part of him is like, I could keep going. It's like, no, we don't keep going. Now we gotta, because here's the one thing is, right, like people spend all that energy, like mental energy, like trying to get there. But then once you get there, it's like, what the fuck do I do? How do I get out? Then no one thinks about that, right? You need to have enough energy for that part, because that part is the hardest, because instinctively the way you are wired, it's like your body keeps track of these fucking things. It's like, hey, you know, we just lost 10% of our body weight. It's time to fucking eat, because there's obviously enough food here now. And the hunger actually can be worse on the other side compared to on the way down. So yeah, you want interventions to be appropriate given your skill level, right? And everyone's going to be very, very different. Like someone who grew up in a food desert here in the US versus someone who grew up like an upper middle class, like in Napa Valley with their family, fruits and vegetables and protein. That was always very different palates. You have to take all these things into consideration, give them the right assignments, make sure they stop every step with a little bit in the tank so that they can maintain, like stabilize a little bit. And it's like lifting weights, right? It's like your jumps need to make sense. Your jumps need to make sense on that level. It's just so much more complicated because obviously, you know, if I were to tell you, blow it up 300 on that fucking bar, I have excellent willpower, you'd be like, bro, like, you know what's going to happen to you? You're about to get fucking, it's the end of you. You're mangled. It's not as obvious as like with like the mental shit that you can do to yourself. Right. So yeah, it's the long road, but we can train ourselves to do damn near anything. I believe that's the real, like, as much as, you know, this thing, it's complicated. It breaks in so many ways. Like the bandwidth and what you can do with it is you can train yourself to do fucking anything.
It's amazing. What, and you know, every time you do something difficult, you prove yourself. You can do even more, and then you're like, okay, so I got here. Then maybe next time when I'm in a situation like this, I know I can even push a bit harder without burning out, without dying, without killing myself, trying to accomplish whatever I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah, and that's why, you know, we opened up about how the freaks are the freaks and how what they do, it doesn't matter. And sometimes I think
it really doesn't matter. It's really amazing to me, because one time I saw an Italian lifter, it's Carola Garra. She posted something about her training, like it was on Word or something like that, you know, and it was the weirdest thing you could ever imagine. And she's just one of the top lifters, right? And I think that if any other coach saw that program, would be like, what are you doing? What's going on? And she's making progress, right? Or you have Agatha Sitko with her 6 SBDs per week, 6 SBD sessions per week. And anyone would say that would be crazy, but she's making progress, right? And she's one of the top lifters in the world. And it's like, when you're meant to do something, when you're born to do something, you're going to make progress regardless. You can see it in other sports when you see, I don't know, LeBron James training and doing the weirdest exercises ever, and he's one of the best, or Tom Brady, or any athlete that's on the top level. They're gonna be great, even doing the most stupid things you can think of.
Oh, here's the funny part though, is like there's still a technical aspect to the powerlifting, so you can still learn from them. Like a kid can talk to someone who's kind of sketchy in that way. They get something. They're like, oh, okay, he saw my starting position off the floor and he was able to break that down. But bodybuilding is just physiological responses. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like, I don't know, some people tan better than others, right? Like a ginger would be like, oh, I can get pretty dark. Like, I'm gonna follow Alberto's like tanning protocol. I'm like, bro, that's not gonna fucking work. Okay, so it's just a response. You have no control over it to a large extent. I've seen some wild things where I'm like, it's insane that your genetics like made it this far through human history, basically. Right? Because there's no reason to have this much muscle and this little body fat for no reason. But what I was saying is, like, for these people, I don't think sport is, as we were discussing, like, is it the name of the game is to train yourself to do anything, to gamify everything at the end. You just want to gamify whatever it might be. Everything's a fucking game. That's all it is. Sports, like, that's what they are. It's like your playground to gamify things so that then you can take these upgraded versions of you and hopefully apply it to something much more important. That's the real lessons. And I think that's where, especially adults, like, do the iron game things. Like they're not seeing that. It's like, no, you don't put your kid in basketball because you're like, this fucker is going to be LeBron James. You put him in there because of all the other qualities that, he will develop through it. No different with this. Like that's, so sometimes the freak athletes, I don't think they get as much of that as someone who is like literally just scratching and crawling to like be above average.
Yeah, it's like when the better coaches probably weren't great athletes. It's because they had to figure everything out. They had to look everywhere to make a little bit of progress, and you have the genetic freaks that just got better by waking up, right? And doing the work.
If you don't die, you'll be good. You'll be better than yesterday. That's it. Yeah, just don't die. That's what your program says.
Okay, cool. So this has been great. Thank you for being here. And I don't know, do you have anything else to add?
No, my pleasure. You'll want me to hop on board again at some other point. I'd gladly do it. Again, like I don't do powerlifting. I don't exist primarily in that world, but I'm always like kind of the lurker creep. I'm always like just watching because it's really interesting.
You have worked with powerlifters, right? You were working with the lady?
Yeah. No, the ones that aren't afraid, they come to me because literally, you're waxing. That's all you're gonna be doing.
Yeah.
Go clean my cars for 6 weeks. Yeah.
But it works. So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
well.
Cool. Thank you, Monica. No, I appreciate it sincerely.
Bye, everyone.